Good morning, everybody. And today I am back here to teach you geography. This is the second session of geography class 9th. And today we are going to start with the shape and size of the earth. And in this we are going to see about some misconceptions in the ancient time to the earth shape. Second, we are going to see about the Magellan's expedition. Third, we are going to see about the present space age, that how actually it has affected the shape of the earth, the conceptions about the shape of the earth. And the fourth, we are going to see about the shape of the earth, what it is called. So let's start here. In the ancient time, what happened? The people, they believe the earth actually is a flat. And this is why nobody wants to go for the long voyage, because during that time actually only the known world was Europe, Asia and the northern part of Africa. And nobody wants to actually go for the long voyage because the people, they believe that earth actually is a flat standing on four pillars. And some scientists who actually have opposed and who have given some right theories, and they told that the earth is not flat, but actually it is round in shape. So what happened? They were highly criticized. Among them actually, you must be knowing about Galileo. He was put into prison for when actually he explained, he had given the theory that earth is not flat, but earth actually is round in shape. Well, so these were some misconceptions about the earth shape during the ancient time. Well, after that, in the medieval period, with the Magellan's expedition, you all must be knowing about the Magellan Fernandez, who was the man, actually was the first person who just completed the complete voyage of the earth. And by his expedition, he proved that earth is not flat, but actually it is a round in shape. So this was the first proof given by, or you can say it was held by the Magellan Fernandez. Well, now at present, as all of you know, this is a space age, and now there are so many satellites are there, and the satellites which gives a picture, it gives a very, very clear picture that the earth is not flat, but actually it is round in shape. And everybody knows now that earth is round. As the other planets, earth is also round in shape. Now next is, in the primary class, you have studied that earth is round like a ball. But in class 8, when you came and you come to know that earth is not round, but actually it is slightly flattened at the poles and bulging at the equator. And the shape of the earth, that's why it is oblate. It is not spherical, but we call it oblate spheroid. This oblate spheroid, for this actually there is the one name is given, just like the different shapes. Like example, for the square, when you talk about square actually is a definite shape. Circle is a definite shape. Same way, rectangle and even the triangle are the definite shapes. So here the earth shape is known as geoid. When we talk about geoid means earth shape. What is earth shape? Slightly flattened at the poles and bulging at the equator. So this is about the shape and size of the earth. Now here, these are some important things. Now next thing we are going to see about the proofs of the earth shape. There are different proofs here given. Now that actually proves, because of that actually you come to know that earth is not flat, it is round in shape. So let's see here some of the proofs. And just behind here, so here these are some proofs. The first one, as you can see, celestial bodies are all spherical in shape. If you see all the celestial bodies, maybe it is a sun or moon and all the stars and planets, they are round in shape, and this is why during the ancient time the philosophers, they have given the statement that earth actually is also round in shape. So this was the first proof. Second is the circumnavigation. Already I explained you that circumnavigation, the first circumnavigation of the earth was completed by Ferdinand Magellan. And he proved by his circumnavigation that earth is round in shape. The second proof is, as you can find, the line of visibility. Now what is this line of visibility? Let's see. Now you will see, as you climb up at the higher altitude, you will find you can see at a longer distance. You must be thinking about that there are so many trees and buildings are there, how you can see far. Well, but even when you stand near the seashore and you will see there is no obstruction is there, but then only you will see, you will able to see up to a certain distance. But as you climb up at the higher altitude, and you will able to see at a longer distance. Now this is called the line of visibility. Now this line of visibility also proves that earth is round in shape. The fourth proof is the sunrise and sunset. Now if we think that earth is flat, now it is impossible for the sunrise and sunset, because we all know the sunrise and sunset, it occurs why? Because of the rotation of the earth. As the earth rotates on its axis, and this is why what happened? The sunrise and sunset occurs. Next is the horizon is circular. Now this horizon of the earth, you will see circular in shape, especially when you will go near the coastal areas. And when you will stand near the coast, and you will not able to see any ship and boats if it is coming from very, very far. But as it comes closer and closer, and you will able to see the ship and the boat. But first of all, what? The front portion, and slowly you will able to see the whole ship or the boat. Now this actually proves that earth is round in shape, and this is, you can see, that horizon is circular. You can see the horizon, it's going down as you will standing there near the coast. Now next is the earth surface is curved. Now this thing can be seen, it can be seen during the survey. In the higher classes, there is a survey work is carried by the geographers, and in that actually they used to use the different poles. They fix it at a different distance, and by the help of these poles they survey some region. But during this survey, it has been seen that the pole which is middle part of the region is standing tall. Now that shows what? That proves that earth is circular. The surface of the earth is curved. Now the next is the solar and lunar eclipse. Well, all of you know that the solar and the lunar eclipse are what? Let me explain you. Now what is the solar eclipse? The solar eclipse occurs when the moon comes in between sun and earth. So what happened in this? In this actually what happened? The moon actually the shadow of the moon, it falls on the earth. And when the shadow falls on the earth, and when it falls and that on the region, now there we experience the solar eclipse. And during the solar eclipse, we can find very clearly that there is a round shape of the what? The moon that's going. Well, that is a different thing. But, well, here it doesn't actually prove that the earth is round, but the lunar eclipse, it proves that earth is round. Now, what happened during the lunar eclipse? During the lunar eclipse, the shadow of earth, it falls on moon. Why? Because the earth comes in between the sun and the moon. And so the shadow of the moon when it falls, when the shadow of the earth when it falls on the moon, and it is round in shape. It can be seen. And now this proves that earth is round. Now next is the aerial photographs. Now what are the aerial photographs? Now these aerial photographs actually have been taken by the satellites. Now there are so many pictures are there available on Google even, and which shows the earth is round in shape, because these pictures are taken by the satellites, very clear pictures, and this is a very, very clear proof, right? There is no doubt about it that earth is round in shape. So this is what you have studied now. We have seen here the shape and size of the earth. In this topic we have seen some of the misconceptions during the ancient time. Then second, we have seen here about the Magellan's expedition, that how he has proved that earth is round. Then we have seen about the present space age. Then the fourth is about the shape of the earth. The shape of the earth is oblate spheroid, and which is also called geoid shape. And after that we have seen the different proofs. These are the different proofs. What are they? Celestial bodies, they are spherical, circumnavigation done by the Magellan, line of visibility, sunrise and sunset, horizon is circular, then the lunar eclipse and aerial photographs. Now next we are going to see about the next topic is the earth as the home of the humankind. Means earth as a unique planet. We are going to see what are the conditions which supports the life on the earth. And this is why earth is known as the unique planet. So let's see here. Now we are going to see about the earth as an unique planet. So why the earth is a unique planet? Why we call the earth is a very, very unique planet? Because we all of you know that earth is the only planet which supports life, or you can say where the life exists, because none of the scientists, they have discovered any slightest life and on none of the planets in the whole universe. The life actually have not yet discovered. So life actually is found only on earth, and this is why the earth is called as an unique planet. So we are going to see here, first of all, the condition which supports life on the earth. And the first condition is the distribution of land and water. Second condition is biosphere. And the third condition we are going to see the condition favorable to life on earth. So one by one we are going to see these three conditions which support life. So the first one is the distribution of land and water. Now all of you know that the water covers about 71% part of the earth. The 71% part of the earth is covered by the large water bodies. What we call them? We call them oceans and the sea. And the land, we can say, or you can say that on the continents covers only 29% of the land. Now this is a very unique distribution of land and water on the earth's surface, because on none of the planet actually this large amount of water is found. Well, one more thing we are going to see about, because all of you know one thing, that the land covers 29% and the water covers about 71% part of the earth. But this distribution of land and water is different in both the hemispheres. So now let's see about the hemisphere wise the distribution of land and water. So in the northern hemisphere, if you see in the northern hemisphere, most of the continents, most of the land, they lies in the northern hemisphere. So the percentage of land covering the northern hemisphere is 61%. How much it is? 61%. And the water covers only 39%. So you can see here in the northern hemisphere, the water is less than the land. Well, but when you will see in the southern hemisphere, and you will find the land covers only 19%. How much? Only 19%. Land is only 19%, but the water covers about 81%. So there is a vast difference between the ratio of land and water in the southern hemisphere. So this is the land and water distribution on the planet of the earth. But here we are going to see some more points in this topic. And the first thing we will see about the antipodal arrangement. If you see the globe, and you will see if one side, if there is a land just opposite of the globe, you will find there is water. Example, a very simple example is the southern hemisphere. There lies Antarctica, one of the continent. But just opposite of the southern hemisphere, that is on the northern hemisphere, there lies Arctic Ocean. So they are just opposite. Southern hemisphere, there is a land, but the northern hemisphere, there is a water body. Same way, if you will find, there is a Northern America, North America. North America is one of the big continent. Now just opposite of North America, you will find there is the Indian Ocean. Again, water body. Now the biggest landmass actually is Europe and Asia. Europe and Asia, they are the two continents, but because they are joined together, so together they form the biggest landmass. And just opposite of this biggest landmass, if you will find, there is the biggest ocean. Which ocean? It is Pacific Ocean. So this is how actually this position of land and water on the earth is called antipodal arrangement. What do you call it? Antipodal arrangement. Now next is the landmass forming a girdle in the northern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, if you find, there is the biggest landmass Europe and Asia together, we call it Eurasia, lies. And one of the more, one another continent, big continent, North America is also found in the northern hemisphere. And if you find they just forms a complete girdle over the whole northern hemisphere. And if you find these continents, actually Northern America is separated by Eurasia by two straits. What are these two straits? Let's see here. If you find the Alaska, the northern part, the Alaska region in North America, it is separated by a Bering Strait from Russia. A very, very narrow water body separates that Asia and North America. And again, if you find between Europe and North America, there lies Davis Strait separating Greenland and North America. And again, between Greenland and Europe, again there is a narrow water body. So this is how actually in the northern hemisphere, these continents, Europe, Asia and North America, they forms a complete girdle. Now next is the landmass are narrowest in the southern hemisphere. And if you see in the southern hemisphere, you will find the land masses are very narrow. South America towards south, it becomes most narrowest and narrow. Then there is Africa to the south, it becomes narrow. Then there is Australia, a small continent. So mostly you will find the big water bodies covering the southern hemisphere. So this is the description about the distribution of land and water. Now second thing we are going to see about the biosphere or the ecosystem. Now here the biosphere actually is the sphere of life. I explained you in the previous class that biosphere actually is a narrow realm between the three realms, that is atmosphere, lithosphere and hydrosphere, where the life exists. So this narrow zone in this all the three realms where the life exists, we call it biosphere. So here the biosphere also can be described as that biosphere is the sphere of life which spreads over all the other three spheres. So here this biosphere term was first actually it was used by one Austrian scientist. His name was Edward Suess. So he was the first person who actually used this term biosphere. Afterwards, now we are all using this term. Now next is the ecosystem. This biosphere, as you can see, this biosphere is also known as ecosystem. Why? Because if you find ecosystem, actually there is a more deeper description about the ecosystem, because you can find this ecosystem even in a small pond, in ocean, or maybe in the river. Now what is the ecosystem? In ecosystem, all the living creatures, like in the water body, like in one small pond, where are the microbes are found, where are the aquatic creatures are found, small fish and the big fish. There are different types of plants, algae are also found. Now what happens? They all depends upon each other. Like this, they help each other in the existence of life. So this is an ecosystem on a very small scale, but the whole earth, if you find everything, maybe the aquatic life, or maybe it is living creatures on the land, or the plants on the land, or the plants which are found under the water, in the water, or even the microbes, even the birds, they all actually helps each other. They are all interlinked with each other, and together they form a ecosystem. Now, in ecosystem, now in this topic, biosphere, we are going to see some more points. Example, we are going to see about the environment. Then we are going to see about the nitrogen cycle. Then we are going to see about the solar energy. Then we are going to see the heat cycle. At the last, we are going to see heat cycle. It is important because I will explain you at the last. And then we are going to see the water cycle. So I am going to just explain you. Let's see first of all the environment. What is environment? Now, if you find environment, sometimes we call the word environment actually is used in a very, very broader sense. Sometimes we call it, like example, office environment, home environment, then there is a school environment, then market environment. So this environment actually is used in a broader sense. But what is the meaning of environment? Let's see here what the books tells about the environment. So there actually in the whole earth you will find there are the living creatures are found and even the living non-living beings, non-living things. What are the non-living things? Example, air. Then there is the soil, water. These are the non-living things, and living things are man, animals, birds, plants, even the microbes. So what happens? These all living things and the non-living things, they are interlinked with each other, and together they form an environment. We can define it as in these words: air, water, man, animals, plants, plantations, soil and bacteria are all invisible. Sorry, they are all invisibly, they are interlinked. They are visible actually, but invisibly they are interlinked. We can't see that how they are interlinked. And this interlinking, because by the interlinking what happens? They sustains the life system. They just actually forms the life sustaining system. What they forms? They forms a life sustaining system. And this is how they forms the environment. Now next we are going to explain you about some cycles, because as all of you know, there are some gases which are very, very important. We'll see afterwards also. Like example, the nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the life supporting gas, and the atmosphere of the earth contains 78% of nitrogen. So how this nitrogen is so important, and what is this nitrogen cycle? Because if you see, all the living things, not only the plants and animals, everything, all the living things, they depend upon the nitrogen. Nitrogen is a very, very important element for the growth of all the living things. Sorry. Now here, this nitrogen cycle, if suppose continuously the living things, they use nitrogen, and if it will be not maintained in the atmosphere, what will happen? After some times, the amount of nitrogen can be decreased. But there is one cycle keeps on going on, and here what happened? First of all, the plants, they use the nitrogen, then they prepare the food. Then what happens? When all the living things, they die, they go through the process of decomposition, and in this process again the nitrogen gas is released in the atmosphere. And this is how this nitrogen is maintained in the atmosphere, and this is called nitrogen cycle. Now next we are going to see about the solar energy. Now all of you know, the solar energy actually is the one of the most important energy. The whole life actually, all the living things on the earth, they depends upon the solar energy. But how actually we use this energy? You may have heard about doctors saying that we need the vitamin D. And what is the source of vitamin D? The sun rays. Even the doctors also, they sometimes prescribe their patient, if they are weak, their bones are weak, they prescribe them to sit in the sun. Why? So that they can get the vitamin D. Well, but we are going to see here that how this solar energy is changed into the chemical energy. Now, all of you know, the plants, what they do? The plants convert the solar energy into a chemical energy, and this is called photochemical process. This photochemical process is one of the process, right? It is the one process actually we change the solar energy into chemical energy. Now in plants, this photochemical process occurs in a form of photosynthesis. Many of you have studied about the photosynthesis. So what happened? The plants, in the presence of sunlight, and as it presents, chlorophyll is also present in that. They use the carbon dioxide and they prepare food. So what happened there? They convert the solar energy into a photochemical, or you can say a chemical energy, right? Into a food, right? Now next is, so this is a solar energy. The sun gives energy every day, and this energy flows to the plants, to the human beings, in the animals, and like this it just continues. Now next is we are going to see, next is the water cycle. I told you already that heat cycle you will see at last. So I will show you one picture, but at last. So first of all we are going to see about the water cycle. Now all of you know that the water is very, very important. And water covers about 71% part of the earth. But it's not only that water in so abundant amount found on the earth. But one more important thing is this water is maintained in the atmosphere, on the land, in the ocean by a cycle. And this cycle is called water cycle. So what is the water cycle? You will find there are the wind. What happened? They evaporates. They helps in the evaporation of the water in the presence of sunlight. So by the evaporation, the water changes into water vapor. When the water vapor, they get saturated, they forms cloud. These clouds are carried by the winds in the very interior parts of the continent. And what happened? When they get the condition, a favorable condition for the condensation, and condensation occur, and what happened? Most of the time, rainfall occurs. Some places you can find the snow also on the mountainous region, and the hailstones also occurs. And again, all the water which falls there on the earth, they collects in the water bodies in the form of the rivers, collected in the lake, even in the underground water. We call it underground aquifer. And this water through the small streams, they just forms the bigger streams, and together many bigger streams, they forms the small rivers, and many small rivers together, they forms the big river, and at last this water is drained in the ocean. And again the evaporation occurs. So this is one cycle you can see. First of all, by evaporation, water changes into water vapor. Water vapor gets saturated, forms the cloud. Clouds are carried by the winds in the interior parts of the continents. And by the process of condensation, rainfall occurs, and this water gets collected together and forms the river, and these rivers bring the water back in the ocean. So this is a one cycle. We call it water cycle. Now this water cycle is also known as hydrological cycle. There is one more term we use for the water cycle, and we also call it hydrological cycle. Now next is the third topic. We are going to see the conditions favorable to life on earth. Now there are the three conditions. You must, in the small lower classes, you have maybe already studied about all these things. Now what are these things? So it will be a revision for you. Let's see here. The first thing is the distance from the sun. Second is the life supporting gases. And third is the water in abundance. So the first point, as you can find here, distance from the sun. The last class, in the previous class, I explained you about the distance and how the different planets, they actually have a different distance from the sun. They are at a different distance. But if you see about the earth, so earth actually neither very far like the Jupiter, Saturn and Neptune, which are very cold planets, nor the earth is very close like the Mercury and Venus. So this exact distance from the sun, it allows the earth, our planet, to get the solar radiation in an amount what it needs, or what you can say what actually it is required for the life on the earth. And this is how you can see here, distance from the sun is a very important factor. And because of this accurate distance from the sun neither is very hot nor it is very cold. So this is how the temperature on the earth actually is very favorable for the life. Now next is we are going to see about the life supporting gases. What are the life supporting gases? If you find, the earth has 78% nitrogen. Atmosphere of the earth contains 78% of nitrogen, 21% of oxygen and 0.03% of carbon dioxide, and all the other gases, they forms less than 1%. So these three gases, well, all of you know nitrogen and oxygen is the important gas, but even carbon dioxide also is known as a life supporting gas. So let's see here. So here if you find here, the nitrogen, already we have seen here in the nitrogen cycle that how the nitrogen is very important for the growth of not only plants, but it is actually also important for the growth of all the living beings. Next is the oxygen. Now all of you know, all the living beings, the life, we all needs oxygen. Oxygen is a very important gas for respiratory. So you will see most of all the living beings, we take oxygen and we take out what? Carbon dioxide. Well, now this carbon dioxide even is a very important. Why? Because already I have explained you previously that this carbon dioxide actually is used by the plants to prepare the food. And this is how the carbon dioxide is utilized by the plant to preparing the food, and it is also an important gas. Now you will compare it, means the planet of the earth, if you compare it with the other planets, you will find that the other planets, they don't contain these life supporting gases. Maybe some of the planets, they contains large amount of nitrogen, but then oxygen is absent. And if some planets, like example Venus, contains large amount of carbon dioxide, but it is very large amount. Nitrogen and oxygen is absent there. It is very less amount. So in this way actually, the life supporting gases which are found in the atmosphere of the earth, right? But also in an amount that is required for the life. So this is how you have seen here the life supporting gas makes our planet Earth as a unique planet. Now the last point we are going to see about the water in abundance. Already I have explained you about the water and the water is very essential, already we know. And but one thing, if you compare our Earth with the other planets, none of the planets actually they contains water. Maybe some of the planets, some slight amount of water have been discovered, but the amount of water is very less. Very less. It can't be utilized. It can't support life. And this is how this abundant water, that large amount of water, it also makes our planet Earth as a very unique planet. Now, as I told you, I will explain you about the heat cycle. Now look here. Now this is a diagram that shows about the heat cycle. Now here you will see here, this is sun and this is the insolation, solar radiation. So the solar radiation enters in the atmosphere and what happens here? 15%, well before that actually if you see here, 40% of the solar radiation it is reflected back, reflected by the clouds and the air, gases in the atmosphere. 15% is absorbed by the air and water vapor within the atmosphere. And what happens? Only 45% reaches to the Earth's surface. Now this 45% which reaches to the Earth's surface, this is called actually insolation. What do you call? Insolation. You will study this thing afterwards in the coming chapters. Now this is the ground, Earth surface. And you will find here the sun rays strikes the Earth's surface and this Earth again radiates the heat back. So when this heat is radiated back, this we call terrestrial radiation. What do you call? Terrestrial radiation. So let me again revise it. The radiation of the sun enters in the atmosphere is called solar radiation. Now 40% is reflected back, 15% is absorbed, 45% intercepted by the Earth's surface, and this amount is called insolation. Actually this 45% is called insolation. Now again the Earth radiates the heat back and this is called terrestrial radiation. But how this heat is radiated back? Because you have studied about the transfer of heat. The heat is transferred by three ways. What are they? Radiation, conduction and convection. But when you will see in the atmosphere of the Earth, you will find all these three process takes place. So first of all, let me explain you how. In detail, you will be studying again in the coming chapters in more detail. This is just one glimpse. So first of all, this heat is radiated back, and this radiation, that is terrestrial radiation, this is what? A radiation. We call it terrestrial radiation. But this heat is radiated only up to a certain altitude, means not very high altitude. What happens? It heats the air very close to the Earth's surface. Now what happens when this air becomes hot? It rises up, and cold air comes down to take its place, and this is how it forms another process, what we call convection process. But with this process also, up to only a certain height, the atmosphere gets heated. Now what happened after that? After that, this heat actually is transferred to the next level. Next level means just next layer of the atmosphere. From there another layer, from there another layer. So this is how you can see a conduction process is going on, but at a very, very high altitude. Conduction process takes place at very, very high altitude. And this is what you have seen here. This is called heat cycle. The solar energy enters in the atmosphere. Then we have seen 40% is reflected back by the clouds and by the different air, different gases in the air, and 15% is absorbed mostly by the water vapor and carbon dioxide and other dust particles and other gases. And what happens? Only 45% reaches to the Earth's surface, and we call it insolation. Now what happened? The Earth gets heated, absorbs the heat, and this heat is again radiated back. What do you call it? Terrestrial radiation. Now this heat is radiated first of all by radiation process, but only the lower layer of the atmosphere gets heated. After that, as the air gets hot, it rises up. Cold air comes down to take its place, and this is the convection process. By this process, up to a certain height, the atmosphere gets heated. But after that, what happens? The heat is transferred to the next layer, then to the next layer, and again to the next layer. And this is how you can see the conduction process also taking place. And this is the whole cycle, because every day it takes place when the sun rises. The whole thing started, the whole process starts. And with the with the sunrise, it starts, and with the sun sets, it gets over. So every day this process, this cycle takes place. So this is about the heat cycle. Now here the last topic is of this chapter is the satellite. Earth satellite, that is moon, because Earth has only one satellite and we call it moon. So let's see here. Not because the moon is not in your syllabus, but as it is given in your book, so it is needed, it is important that I should explain you, but I will give you some very, very small glimpse of the moon. So let's see here. First of all, we are going to see about the mean distance from the Earth, the distance of the moon from the Earth. Now look here. The maximum distance, because all of you know the moon, it revolves around the Earth. So in this revolution, sometimes the moon gets at the farthest distance and sometimes it comes to the closest distance from the Earth. Now here, when the moon it gets to the longest distance from the Earth, we call it apogee. We call it apogee. But when the moon comes to the closest distance from the sun, we call it perigee. So the farthest distance we call apogee. Closest distance we call it perigee. Now next thing about the atmosphere. And you will be amazed to know that the moon does not have any atmosphere. Why? Why the moon doesn't have any atmosphere? Why? Let's see here. The reason is gravitational force of the moon is very, very weak, and this is why they are unable to hold the gases, and this is why the moon doesn't have any atmosphere. Next thing we are going to see about the temperature. Now during the daytime, the average temperature which is being measured on the moon is 100 degrees centigrade. What is 100 degrees centigrade? On Earth, 100 degrees centigrade is the boiling point. And this 100 degrees centigrade is the average temperature during the day. And during the night, what happened? During the night, temperature falls down and the average temperature becomes minus 180 degree. It is not 180 but minus. So here we have seen the maximum temperature is 100, minimum is minus 180. Why it is? The reason is, the question can be asked here, why the temperature during the day on the moon is so high and during the nights very low. So you can write the answer. So the reason is the moon doesn't have any atmosphere, the absence of atmosphere. Well, next is the another feature is the rotation and the revolution. Now here the moon actually takes how much time to complete one revolution of the earth? So that is 27.5 days. The exact time actually is 27 days, 7 hours, 43 minutes, 11.47 seconds. This is the exact time the moon takes to complete one revolution. But one very important fact about the rotation and the revolution of the moon is the time duration of both rotation and revolution of the moon is same. Means the moon actually rotates on its axis in the same period. Means it takes 27 days, 7 hours, 43 minutes, 11.47 seconds. So this is the time actually which is taken by the moon not only to complete one revolution but also to complete one rotation on its axis. And this is why there is the one question which can be asked, very common question, which will be asked in your exercise in the examination. That is why only one side of the moon is visible from the earth. One side of the moon means from India you will see only one side of the moon, not the another side, just opposite. Why? Because the rotation and the revolution of the moon means the time difference, the period taken to complete one rotation and to complete one revolution is both are the same. Now, the special feature, the last point we are going to see about the moon, that is a special feature. And here you will see here the moon is very important in one thing. The very most important, you can say the most important feature, or you can say the special feature of the moon is the moon actually is responsible for causing the tide. In the coastal area you will find tides are very important. It has a great effect on so many things. You will study afterwards. So the moon actually is responsible for the tides on the earth. This is a special feature. So these are some description, and this is how this whole chapter is finished. But still I will take 2-3 minutes because I am having the time, some time is left. And so let me revise this whole chapter. Okay? Already I have got 5 minutes, but I think 2 and 3 minutes it will take to just revise the whole chapter. So in this first chapter, what you have studied, let's see here. First of all, the previous class I explained you about I've given you the small description about the universe. Then I explained you about the solar system, the earth and the other planets which revolves around the sun, that forms the solar system. I explained you about the asteroids which are found between the Mars and the Jupiter, how they were formed. After that, I explained you about I have given you some important facts about the earth. Then I explained you about the different realms of the earth. I explained you about the 3 realms. What are they? Number 1 is the lithosphere, number 2 hydrosphere, number 3 is atmosphere. Then we have seen about the biosphere. What is biosphere? a narrow zone in all these three realms, that is lithosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere, where the life exists, is called biosphere. Then after that, I explained you about the shape of the earth. We have seen some misconceptions during the ancient time when the people they believed that earth is a flat. Then I explained you that how it is confirmed with the Magellan's expedition around the earth, that earth is round in shape. Then I explained you about the oblate spheroid, that is the shape of the earth is called oblate spheroid. This shape is called, the name actually, you can say the noun is geoid. Geoid means earth shape. Then I have given you some proof. The first proof is the all celestial bodies are round in shape. Second is the circumnavigation of the earth, that is done by the Ferdinand Magellan. Then the line of visibility I explained you. Then I explained you about the sunrise and sunset, also proves that earth is round in shape. Then the horizon is circular. I explained you on the seashore, you will see the horizon that is circular in shape. You can see very clear there. Then the earth's surface is curved. That is being proven, especially during the survey in geography, when the survey is done, survey of some area by the help of the poles, well, different equipments. Next is I explained you about the lunar eclipse, when the shadow of moon the shadow of earth falls on the moon. That clearly shows you the round shape. And then after that, the last one is the aerial photographs taken by the satellites. The next topic we have seen about the earth as a unique planet. Now what are the factors which makes the earth a unique planet? The first we have seen the distribution of land and water. And that actually we have seen the land and water distribution in the northern hemisphere. Land is much bigger. How much land? It is 61%. Water is only 39%. But in the southern hemisphere, the land is how much? Only 19%. And water is 81%. Then we have seen in the northern hemisphere, all the continents, they forms a complete girdle. But in the southern hemisphere, the continents are very narrow, right? Then another thing we have seen about the antipodal arrangement, the land and water, they actually arranged there on the globe as antipodal. What is the meaning of antipodal? If one side there is a land, just opposite side of the globe you will find water. The very simple example is in the southern hemisphere there is Antarctica, northern hemisphere there is the Arctic Ocean. Well, the same thing you will find most of the places, all the globe you will find the same thing. Then I explained you about the biosphere, which is also called ecosystem. Then I explained you about the environment, that how actually the non-living things and living things, they are interlinked with each other and they form the environment. Then I explained you about the solar energy. In this what I explained you? I explained you that how the solar energy is converted into a chemical energy, into a food. How? By photochemical energy in plants. This energy, this type of process we can see in a way of photosynthesis. Next we have seen about the nitrogen cycle, that how the nitrogen is it is maintained in the earth atmosphere. Then we have seen about the heat cycle. I shown you this diagram. I explained you that how the heat is actually maintained in the whole earth. Then we have seen about the water cycle, which is also called hydrological cycle, and this is how the water is maintained all over the earth, not only the water bodies but also on the land, in the continents. And then we have seen the last one, the condition which is favorable for life. And what are they? The first one we have seen the distance, the accurate distance from the sun. Second is the life supporting gases. And third we have seen about the abundant amount of water which is found on earth. And this all makes the earth as a unique planet. And the last topic, I have given you a small description about the moon, which is the only satellite of the earth. Have a good day all of you, and revise it the whole thing. You can see this video again and again. Thank you very much.